I've had a lot of passions throughout my life. It's the reason I make these side quest videos, because I love to share the wide array of things that have impacted me. Some passions have fizzled out quickly, such as my interest in playing video games. Others have stood the test of time, like my love for making these videos. For most of my life, I had been fascinated by space. In fact, some might argue that it was a large part of my personality, but it wasn't something that stuck around. When I wrote down the idea for this video 3 years ago, I had lost almost all interest in space, and I wanted to explore why. What caused me to lose such a defining passion? Was it something that I would ever get back? I wanted to try to answer this question with a reflection on human behavior. I've always been rather optimistic about humanity. It's something that's been taken advantage of many times throughout my life, but for some reason, I still believe in the best of us. That said, there are certain topics that challenge my optimism. Nothing more so than the idea of weapons. They can be used to protect our communities, but more often than not, they're used to tear them apart. For as long as humans have existed, we have justified the need for weapons. The first one was probably a caveman with a rock, but as time went on, we kept evolving, kept creating better and more violent ways to hurt each other. These tools have fractured our planet into artificial lines in a strange attempt to separate where our communities start and end. There's an old, probably made-up story I heard when I was a kid. It says that the English rejected the crossbow when it was first invented, considering it a form of cheating. After all, it wouldn't be fair to have such an advantage in combat. A handful of skilled archers would now be opposing hundreds of unskilled soldiers equipped with the crossbow. The advantage was volume. Of course, archaeologists have found use of the crossbow in ancient China, which I'm pretty sure came before England, but the idea of the narrative is interesting. It implies a sort of fairness and etiquette in warfare. It's an optimism in humanity, even if it's wildly misplaced. This need to evolve our tools didn't play by these artificial rules, though. Humanity didn't stop at the crossbow, and we would go on to create a wide variety of weapons that would test the boundaries of the word unfair. During the Second World War, Nazi Germany created one of these weapons. This is the V2. The first ballistic missile that was able to hit targets 200 miles away. It was the culmination of the work of thousands of scientists and engineers and was forged in the name of expanding their borders in an attempt to rule the world. Because of their unmatched range, the Nazis were able to launch more than 3,000 of these missiles between Belgium and England, uncontested. This line of missiles is over 5 miles long, by the way. Anyone that found themselves in the path of one of these missiles could do nothing to stop it. A large part of that was because they were targeted at innocent civilians. The Nazis were terror bombing. 15,000 people died as the result of the V2 missile, both from the targets they were launched at and from the people who were forced to make them in concentration camps. At the same time, the United States had also been working on their own version of an unfair weapon. This is the atomic bomb. Similar to the V2 missile, it was also created by thousands of the brightest minds in the country. On July 16, 1945, this weapon would be tested in the New Mexico desert for the very first time. 2 days later, without any knowledge of what the Americans had been working on, Japan tried to negotiate for an end of the war, as it was clear they could not stop the U.S.'s island-hopping advance through the Pacific. The United States President, Harry S. Truman, refused to negotiate with the Japanese, instead demanding their unconditional surrender. His true goal, however, was to reveal the atomic bomb to the world and opted for what he called a strategic bombing. He wanted to obliterate the morale of the citizens of Japan. In my opinion, this was an act of terrorism. Only 3 weeks later, the little boy bomb would be dropped on Hiroshima, a city largely unaffected by the war. It was detonated above a hospital and a school, instantly vaporizing the patients, doctors, and children below. In the blink of an eye, the entire city was leveled. 3 days later, another atomic bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. In total, just 2 bombs killed over 250,000 people, most of which were Japanese civilians. That is 20 times more than what 3,000 V2 missiles did. Just 2 bombs. The Emperor of Japan presented his surrender in a radio broadcast where he said this: "The enemy has begun to employ a new and cruel bomb, causing immense and indiscriminate destruction, the extent of which is beyond all estimation. Should we continue to fight, not only would it result in the ultimate collapse and obliteration of the Japanese nation, but it would also lead to the total extinction of human civilization. After the war, over 1,000 Nazi scientists and engineers fled to the United States to work on a series of sequels to the V-2 missile. The United States Army knew they weren't the only ones who wanted this new weapon, and with the power of the atomic bomb atop a ballistic missile of their own, well, they would be unstoppable. So, in return for this new superweapon, the Army gave these Nazi scientists amnesty despite their horrific war crimes. The Soviet Union would quickly showcase their intense interest in making one of their own ballistic missiles. They would showcase their capabilities by putting the first man-made object into orbit around the planet. For the first time ever, when you looked up at the night sky, something else looked back. It was called Sputnik, a satellite that only emitted a radio signal, but it represented something much more disturbing. It was the first demonstration that mankind could weaponize the vastness of space, unlocking a new depth of despair for the world. The United States continued pumping billions of dollars into the development of their own long-range weapon, and soon, both countries would prove that they could each create an arsenal of nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles that could strike anywhere on Earth, otherwise known as ICBMs. They would each work on their own upgrades to these missiles, but there's one in particular that the Americans had been working on that really highlighted how far things had advanced in just a few short years. This is the Titan II. It's a two-staged missile that was meant to be the most advanced ICBM of the time and was made with extraordinary destructive capabilities. It was equipped with a 9-megaton nuclear warhead, which was 450 times more destructive than the atomic bombs used at the end of the Second World War. And remember, just 2 of those bombs killed 20 times more people than the V-2 rocket that inspired this very missile. The merging of the long-range capabilities of the V-2 and the intense power of the atomic bomb created something so horrible that the goal was to never actually use it. The people that worked in the bunkers of the Titan II silos were told that if one of these was ever launched, the project would be deemed a failure. They called it peace through deterrence, but it's much more commonly referred to as mutually assured destruction. Last year, I actually got to see one of these missiles in person. There is only one remaining on Earth, and it's been preserved at the Titan Missile Museum just south of Tucson, Arizona. Don't worry, it's not a functional rocket, as every Titan II was retired in 1987 in an effort to modernize the US's nuclear stockpile. If you ever find yourself in the area, I highly recommend going. The tour guides really give the entire thing the proper gravity that this conversation requires. Our tour guide was someone who had actually worked in the silo when these things were armed. He was one of the guys that had to be ready to push the button, and he really did an amazing job of showcasing how heavy the entire program was. There were so many systems in place to make sure that it could never be pushed by mistake. But he truly believed that if that call ever came through, he would push it. Fear of nuclear war was incredibly intense in this era, and the anxiety surrounding it shook people to their core. At their peak, there were 54 Titan II missiles deployed throughout the United States, all of which were ready to launch at the request of a single man. Of course, there were more than 54 of these missiles created, but since the Army wasn't really itching to launch any of them, some of them were contracted out to other agencies for other uses. 12 of them were assigned for use by a relatively new government organization, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, better known as NASA, where they would be modified for manned spaceflight in the Gemini program. This program was designed to test and perfect the docking of 2 spaceships. This might not have seemed very important, but the Apollo program would need the lunar lander to dock to the front of the command service module, so the Gemini missions were a critical step in understanding how that could be done. Throughout human history, there have been barriers that we deem impossible to overcome, right up until someone does it. It has been known throughout human history that all above us is a vastness that none of us can comprehend, a vastness that cannot be conquered by man. But yet, there we were, learning things we never thought possible and voyaging to places we thought unreachable, and weirdly enough, all on weapons of mass destruction that were repurposed for science and exploration. The technologies that were being developed by NASA weren't just being used for the benefit of space research, they were being used to help people all over the globe. Despite all these innovations at the time of the Gemini program, there were still an enormous number of unknowns about the universe we live in. For instance, we didn't know if they were planets orbiting other stars, otherwise known as exoplanets. With all of the tools we had at the time, we only knew about the planets in our little solar system. Heck, the reason we even know how to find exoplanets today is because of a fun trick within our own solar system. Every now and again, Venus will pass in front of the Sun, sort of like a solar eclipse, but at a much smaller scale. This event is called the transit of Venus, and it allows you to do some pretty interesting math. If you and a few of your science friends around the Earth record the positions as it crosses paths with the Sun, you can use the parallax of those measurements to calculate the distance from the Earth to the Sun, which has helped us map out the scale of the solar system. Though, there is one really weird quirk with the transit of Venus. It will happen twice within an 8-year window, and then it won't happen again for over 100 years. The very first recording of this transit was on its second pair in 1639, almost 400 years ago. Titan, the hazy moon of Saturn, would be observed for the very first time before the next pair in 1761 and 1769. Each of these were first used to do those parallax calculations. In 1874, the first photos were taken of the event, and once again in 1882. Then, time marched on to the next transit, and boy howdy was it a busy window of time. We would see world-changing inventions like the car, airplane, radio, and television. There would be times of great economic prosperity, and there would also be multiple great economic collapses. There would be multiple world wars, the creation and launching of 3,000 V-2 missiles, and the dropping of 2 atomic bombs. We would see the creation of the transcontinental country called the Soviet Union. Their launching of the first man-made satellite that became so concerning to the United States that they would deploy the Titan II missile in fear. We would also see the fall of that very same transcontinental country that was created. There would be incredible advances in science and engineering. We put people on the moon somewhere in there, and we also started landing robotic probes on other planets. We discovered the existence of Pluto, created a rocket, and sent a probe just to take pictures of it. Heck, the first detection and the first confirmed exoplanets occurred in this window, as did the invention of the internet and the World Wide Web. The rise and fall of Netscape, the creation of Facebook, Google, Palantir, eBay, Amazon, Twitter, and so much more all happened before the next transit of Venus in the year 2004. And what's incredible is that this transit wouldn't even be the one that helped us with getting better at finding exoplanets. That one wouldn't occur until the second transit in 2012. I was in high school during the 2012 transit of Venus, and I was lucky enough to be in an astronomy class at the same time. Our teacher encouraged us to go to the local observatory and have a look ourselves, and so I went. There, through a telescope pointed at the sun with some fancy filters on it, I saw a black dot on a flaming ball that hangs above our heads every day. I could see the scale of these incredible flames emerging from the surface of the sun. I mean, there was a planet right in front of it. It gave some sort of sense of scale for the first time in my life. These flames were the size of multiple planets. It was wild to think about. However, I wasn't there doing science. I was just some dorky high school kid looking up in awe. The real scientists were doing some incredible research, which led us to understanding how to better find exoplanets. And as a result of that, we now have discovered over 6,000 planets outside our solar system. It's something I feel that happens so often now that it's kind of boring when a new one is discovered. If you told a scientist from the first viewing of the transit that this would help us discover over 6,000 planets outside our solar system, they'd probably say, huh? Because that was 400 years ago, and we probably don't speak the same language, and also because I was born in a country that didn't even exist at the time. The next transit of Venus won't occur until 2117. Who knows what things will occur between now and then? I consider myself very lucky to have seen such an incredibly rare event. There have only been 7 observed transits throughout all of human history, and I got to see one of them. I saw a lot of really cool things at that observatory over the years. One of the things that has never ceased to amaze me are the rings and moons of Saturn. When I was a kid, my grandparents had this book called Our Universe. There were incredibly good illustrations of all the planets, and one of my favorites to look at was Saturn. This book was printed in 1980, so there were no close-up photos of it. Though, a few years before this book was printed, there were a set of probes that were happily on their way to the ringed planet to take photos of the various sights to see. There are 2 major points of interest when it comes to Saturn. The rings, of course, and then one of its moons, Titan. When looking back at this book, it says the following about Titan.
Titan probably revolves with the same face always towards Saturn.
It's really common in our solar system to see moons that have the same side facing its planet, a phenomenon called tidal lock. Our own moon is tidally locked. We only ever see the one side. But with Titan, we had no way of knowing. The atmosphere of the small moon is so thick that it's impossible to see the surface from Earth. Just after this book was printed, Voyager 1 and 2 transmitted the first close-up photos of Titan and Saturn, but even this wasn't enough to tell if it was tidally locked. The data we got back from Titan only gave us enough information to better understand its atmospheric makeup. The atmosphere itself was still far too thick to see through. The goal of Voyagers 1 and 2 was to just fly by all these celestial bodies, a grand tour, as it were, so data was always going to be rather limited. However, the photos and data we got back would inspire a dedicated mission to visit Saturn and its moons. This is a Titan IV rocket, the U.S. Army's successor to the Titan II missile. On a cool October night in 1997, it would be used for its only non-military launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Cassini spacecraft on a billion-mile trek to Saturn. Pitch program is in, roll program is in. We have cleared the tower, and the Cassini spacecraft is on its way to Saturn. T plus 20 seconds. All systems are go.
After a couple gravity assists from our old pal Venus, the Cassini-Huygens spacecraft arrived at Saturn in 2004. It was the culmination of thousands of scientists and engineers who all wanted to show the world how beautiful the solar system truly is. For the first time ever, we got to see in incredible detail the rings that gave Saturn its alluring look in the sky. The thin bands showcased an incredible precision and balance of the tiny objects that made them up and the gravity of the gas giant. When Cassini looked back at Earth, we would appear as a tiny blue dot. There were no artificial lines to identify, just a little glowing circle that hosted everyone and everything humanity has ever known. Cassini was also equipped with special cameras that could see through the thick atmosphere of Titan, which meant that we could actually see the surface for the first time. It turns out, Titan is also tidally locked. Cassini also served another purpose: to communicate with its lander companion. The Huygens probe was made to land on Titan, giving us a whole new view of the alluring moon. I have links in the description of all the actual images and even video of the descent of this probe to the surface. You should definitely check it out. It's incredible to me that we, as humans, have landed probes all the way out there. Back up in space, Cassini would go on to showcase how beautiful Saturn is, and in my opinion, it's by far the most beautiful mission NASA has ever done. In 2019, I went on a tour of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, where they have a half-sized model of the Cassini probe, as well as a variety of other model probes they've sent around the solar system. That wasn't the highlight of the tour, though. While we were there, the Perseverance rover was sitting there, waiting to be put into a rocket that would send it to Mars. And even though I was staring at the coolest thing I have ever seen in my life, something I would have dreamed of seeing when I was a kid, I was empty. A few years before, I had been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. Throughout those years, I had been on and off many medications, interacted with dozens of doctors, and after a long enough period of feeling crazy most of the time, I had just lost hope that I would ever feel normal again. This feeling really hit its peak while I was standing there, looking at a robot that was about to go to a whole other planet. It was the first time in my life where I had lost hope and given in to despair. I was completely numb to all the things I loved. After returning home, I checked myself into the hospital for inpatient care, It was my 4th hospitalization, so I kind of knew the ropes at this point. The staff there were honestly incredibly helpful, and they helped give me some hope again. But the passion for space things had seemingly diminished. Part of that was just due to the focus on self-care, but part of it was also that things had seemingly changed with the industry of spaceflight. The corporations had stepped in. When I would see rocket launches, I wouldn't see the NASA logo, an icon that has shown the world the beauty and excitement of what the universe had to offer, as well as what we could do to help our own planet. Instead, I would see a logo for a cold, corporate brand. And then when that brand had enough good press, another one would pop up. Each of these corporations had been tied to countless workplace abuses, sketchy shortcuts, and an infinite wallet to bribe our elected officials in order to bypass regulations put in place to protect all of us. It really felt like space had truly lost its spark for me. The passion was gone, as extraordinarily rich con men had come to plaster their names across the sky, replacing the organizations that had represented a hope for all humanity. All I could see was the rich lifting up the rich, while the rest of us were left behind in their careless abuse of humanity and the Earth itself. But right on the horizon sat a big, stupid rocket with the NASA logo on it. It was made for a mission that brought together people from multiple countries, showing that our lines don't have to divide us. It's a rocket that was about to go back to the moon for the first time in a very long time. Aboard this spectacular spacecraft were astronauts. I'm not talking about some rich jerks who claim they're astronauts. I'm talking real, hard-working, kind, intelligent, and best of all, inspiring astronauts. The kinds of people that I look up to. To me, optimism isn't about blindly ignoring the bad things. It's about learning from the bad things and trying to make something better moving forward. It's hope. The current state of our world is full of terrible things, and it's really easy to give into despair. It paralyzes people, which gives power to the people doing terrible things. You can't stop them if you believe you can't. But I believe in the best of us. That's what I love about this mission. It shows us that despair is a choice we put on ourselves, just like the artificial lines that cover our planet. We can choose the path of despair and send rockets into hospitals, or we can choose the path of hope and send rockets to explore the stars to better all of humanity. As I'm writing this script, the crew of Artemis II has just splashed down from the flyby of the moon. It's a mission that had a lot of firsts, but what's most important to me is that they gave me hope again. They did something I really thought was impossible. They reignited my passion and love for space. I hope this video proved that they did.
One small step for man and a giant leap for mankind. Watch the world forever and go on through all the life ahead. And just like Apollo into the great unknown will follow. So watch the tale that never ends.
Darth Convenience, sir. The enshittification ray is nearing completion, but there's a slight complication.
Always with the complications. Go on, out with it.
Well, sir, it appears that the Reject Convenience is on his way.
Keep working on the enshittification ray, Admiral Zalinki. I will handle the intruder.
You got it.
Look at what you've become. Your obsession has gotten the best of you, John. John is dead. I am what remains. I see. Then I must stop your reckless rampage. You will try.
Sir?
What?
The enshittification ray is asking us to agree to the new terms and conditions before we can use it.
We do not have time for this. Do it!
But sir, it's like 50 pages long. We haven't read them. Maybe we should like go over it together with like a magnifying glass. I don't know, this text is like really tiny.
I refuse to comply with such ludicrous tasks. Agree to the terms at once.
Okay, all right.
What is happening?
It's over, Darth Convenience. Unlike you, I actually read those terms and conditions. Had you read them, you would have known that the laser is now a subscription service, and it won't fire till you pay them a monthly fee.
What? We can't afford that. We spent all our money on the hardware. They can't alter the deal. That's not fair.